Hi, friends. We at GLC would like to take a quick moment to thank you for watching our programs on this platform, and we'd like to ask you for a little favor. Would you please go beneath this video and click the subscribe button? Did you know that by simply subscribing to the GLC YouTube channel, you can help us financially support the programs on this platform? You'll need to be signed into YouTube beforehand. But if not, simply click the subscribe button and YouTube will automatically walk you through the steps to sign in or to create an account. By taking these simple steps, you will not only ensure that you continue to receive our unique programming and gain instant access to the hundreds of videos we post, but more importantly, you'll also be telling YouTube that GLC's content is worth watching and promoting. Likewise, if you enjoyed a specific program, please click the thumbs up button below, which also helps inform YouTube that this is a program worth recommending. Finally, once you have logged in and subscribed, please click the notification bell below in order to receive announcements when we post new content. As usual, feel free to post your questions and comments in the comments section below. We always love hearing from our friends and viewers. Again, thank you for watching and supporting God's Learning Channel. We couldn't spread the message of the gospel without you. Be blessed, and we hope you enjoy the show.
It's another great day at Light of the Southwest. I'm Cher Butler, your host, and today I have with me a special guest named Jayden Shelton. And on the outside, it looks like she's living a picture-perfect life, and she is now, but that's not how it all started. How are you doing, Jayden? I'm so glad to have you with us today.
Hey, I am so excited to be here. I am doing great now. Like you said, life has definitely taken an upside now.
Yes, and I wanted to just give the audience a little backstory of how I met you. And so I met you in a movie theater. I believe it was called the Domino Revival.
Yes.
With Mike Signorelli. And it was such a powerful movie. And at the end of the movie, there was a time for prayer. And so, you know, it's not too often that you're in a movie theater praying, but,
Yeah.
you know, there was a time for prayer in the end. As the movie led us through that prayer, you stood up, and I just felt drawn to pray over you. And it turned out you were battling with suicide at that time. And shortly after that, I kind of took you under my wing as a mentor. You came on to the ministry, I Will Not Keep Silent Ministries, as a youth leader and as a worship leader. And of course, you lead independently with your church in different aspects as well. And now you're moving on, and you've been in college for a year, and you graduated and from high school, and all these amazing things happened so quick. And so, like I said, when I see your smiling face, it looks like you've just lived this picture perfect life, but that's not really how it began. And I know that your story is going to inspire others and help transform others who have been in the very dark valley that you've been in. And so, do you mind if we go back? Let's start with early childhood. Can you give us a snapshot of what it was like in the beginning for you?
Yes. So growing up, I would say that it started, honestly, really shortly after I was born. My mom was married to my dad, and, well, they actually got married before, after. And it started off great, according to my mother, and then it just my dad kind of came out of his, let's say, his true shell, and he became very abusive with not only my mother, but with me as well, starting from a young age. Unusual punishments was really what it started off with. Timeouts where, like, I was handcuffed to these punching bags and stuff. It was just odd timeout places. Wouldn't be your typical thing
Like
that you
torture.
Yes.
It sounds like you went through some kind of strange episodes of torture and abuse.
Yeah. And then at the age of 4, I moved in with my grandmother because my younger brother died at about 3 months old, and they had to do an investigation. Well, from my most recent memory was when I came back around the age of 5, my father started molesting me slowly. He had been grooming me and made me think that it kind of, in my mind, it became a normal thing. This is just what normal life was in a normal family, because I never really stayed at other people's houses. I didn't really know anybody outside of my family. And so he would tell me, if I wanted to play the Xbox longer, and stay up late, that if I went and, went to the room with him and did what he wanted me to do, that I would get those things. And it was always when my mom was at work or something. My mom had no idea of what was going on, and he'd always tell me, I couldn't tell her, that it was our little secret between each other. And so that was a reoccurring thing from the age of 5 to 7, I would say, from what I can remember. And then just repeated abuse. My mom, I would walk out and I would see him beating my mom. She would be on the ground a lot. And there was a time where I went to try to call 911, and he stopped me and told me, you're not going to see daddy anymore if you go to jail. And so that was definitely rough. And at the age of 7, I was at a babysitter's house. And I was at their family's house, and I had become friends with one of their sisters. And I was hanging out with her, and she saw this huge bruise on my back. And what had happened was my father had gotten a rod. It was a metal rod. And he was like, okay, like I got in trouble for lying a lot when I was a kid. And so I was getting spanked, but he used the rod, and I had moved and it got my back. He was just kind of like, that's what you get for moving. And so I had this big purple bruise on my back, and she saw it. And that kind of opened up a conversation of, hey, this is what's going on at home. And so then they, of course, called CPS and whatnot. And CPS came and saw me at school. And they said, okay, we're pulling you out. You're going to go stay with another family for a little bit. And so then the investigation started. And ultimately, I was taken away. My mom and my dad lost custody of us. And they both went to jail because of endangerment, as well as he also got charges for sexual assault or like
And
with a
so your
minor.
brother died, and that was under investigation.
Yes.
And who knows what happened there, really. But then you and your sister were put into foster care.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you were in foster care, and as a child, I want to ask too, while you were young and going through all this, were you ever taught about God? Did you have thoughts about God during the abuse? Because I know many people go through abuse and they wonder where God is. And I want people who hear this today to be encouraged to know that although we all have free will, and some of us use free will to do what is good, and some of us use our free will to do what is evil.
Yeah.
But God does care, and he can sympathize, and he is there, and he will redeem. Did you, in the foster care, or even before that, did you ever feel the presence of God? Did you pray?
So when I still lived with my biological parents, my mom would take us to church, but my dad didn't go so much. But we went to Crossroads, actually, in Odessa, and it wasn't a very often occurrence, and it wasn't a relationship. It was just, hey, we go to church on Sundays. This is what we do, but home is we look different at home, basically. So I never had a relationship at that point. But then after I moved to my foster family, we went to church, another small church in Odessa, with my foster grandmother, and that was where I got baptized at the age of 8. I think it was more of I see everyone else getting baptized, and this feels like the right thing to do. And then after my foster family, we went to Normandy. That is a small little town in East Texas. And
So were you adopted at this point?
no, this was still my foster placement. They had moved there because he got a job
Okay.
as the chief of police. So then we found some churches there. We would go there, and I would go just for Sunday school and Wednesday night church. But then there were some issues with that family. They were not the healthiest. CPS didn't do a great job of looking into them. And so after living with them for 3 years, we got moved again because they weren't safe. But we got to go to somebody that we already knew. And these people that we knew fought really hard for us, and they took us in, and they were able to adopt us within 6 months. So that was my adoptive family. And from then on is where I would say my relationship with God began. I started going to church more. I started leading worship with that church. And it was still more of a religion aspect, but I felt a lot closer to God, and I thought about him a lot more. I was trying to be in my word more. And I remember that was my biggest outlook. I think at many moments, like when I felt like I had nothing else, that was who I had. But even then, I don't think I fully understood it. And so I would, when I was suicidal, my biggest issue was like I felt not I loved God, but I didn't feel good enough for what was happening because I felt I was acting out too much. I got in trouble for hanging out with boys, or well, doing more than just hanging out with boys and just kind of sneaking out, breaking some rules. It wasn't anything too major. It was just disrespecting the rules of my house. And so I got into a lot of these ruts where I felt like I just wasn't good enough. And I would get statistics thrown at me a lot. I felt with my adoptive parents. And at one point I was
What
just,
do you mean by that? Let's talk about that.
okay,
Statistics were thrown at you. So they would talk to you about the statistics of kids in foster care or statistics of what you would be like because of
basically,
it, your story?
yes, basically they would tell me, I mean, they were trying to help me. It wasn't the best way though, because they were telling me most kids when they go through what you've gone through, when they go through sexual assault and stuff, they either end up pregnant as a teenager, they end up doing drugs, alcoholics, and they were just throwing or like on the streets, and they were throwing all these things at me. And so I remember after hearing it so much and seeing what I had already been doing, even though now I look at it and I don't feel it was the worst thing. Don't get me wrong, I was not making the best choices.
Right. They were trying to help you understand your situation.
Yes. Yes.
But sometimes it can just feel like I'm another statistic. And I know that because I was in foster care and adopted too.
Yeah.
So we can kind of relate there. But, and my adopted mother, wonderful lady, she didn't do that, but she was a counselor. So she was skilled. But I
Yeah.
do know other children that come out of foster care and they do hear the statistics, or they're like, you're going to end up like your mom, or you're going to be just like your dad if you do this. And
Yeah.
we just want to highlight today, and I want to highlight today, if you're watching this, that you don't have to be another statistic. You don't have to fit into that category. You can break the mold. And although the world might say one thing, God has a different plan for your life. And that's what happened to you. And so you started, when you go from the foster home to another foster home that eventually adopted. And now you're going through these years and becoming a young adult and adolescence and kind of rebellious and getting these statistics and trying to figure out life with all the chaos. But in the midst of it, the God anointed you as an amazing worship leader. When did
Yeah.
you discover this? How old were you? Because isn't worship an outlet for you as well?
Yes, absolutely. I started singing since I was really young. I think as soon as I could talk, I started singing. But I started the worship, I would say around the age of 10. It was in a 5th grade. I had started learning guitar because I really wanted to learn it so bad. And I started with my local church, and they wanted some youth worship leaders. And so I started with them. And it was a little bit of a process changing from just playing at home, singing at home to, going on stage. But it became something I enjoyed. I looked forward to that. When life was hard at home, when I felt I didn't belong at home, that was where I felt I belonged. That was the place, like, being on stage, and not necessarily out of a look at me, but it was family to me. I think that was the biggest thing at the moment. I don't think my worship was fully in the right place yet, but there was a family there that was loving to me, and they were kind to me. And even, not that my family at home didn't love me, but even whenever times were hard there, I got to come there and be like, okay, I can take a break, I can breathe. And then just having people that would pray over me, that was a huge thing. And then I started writing music from a young age, probably freshman year of high school. So I was about 14. And most of my music was about boys at that age because my heart was after the wrong things. I had a hole in my heart, and I was just trying to fill it with all these different things that weren't going to work. The biggest one was boys. So I mostly wrote about boys, but I had some that I would write about God. And my first one that I wrote, that was, I guess you would say, more of, I guess, kind of a worship song, was when I was suicidal. I think that was my outlet. And this was how instead of journaling, this was how I said, this is how I feel. But also in that song, I was saying, you're not alone. God wants you. He just wants you to come home. Like that was the title of the song, Come Home. And so talking about how it might not feel perfect right now. The world it's a hard place to be in, but he just wants to see you. And I think that was even a message to myself, because I was still dealing with being suicidal in that moment. And just in the moment I was begging God a lot just to end it, because I couldn't do it, which praise the Lord I didn't, because I'm here now and life is great. It's not perfect, but it's been a lot better. And to this day, when I can, music, worship, that's my outlet. I lead with my church, I lead with the ministry, and that is where I think I grow the most too, because that is where I feel my biggest connection with God. I pray and I get my word, but when I worship, that is between me and Him.
And I remember how you came on to I Will Not Keep Silent Ministries worship. We were at the Asbury United Methodist Church here, and some of my board members were pastors there, and wonderful people. And I remember we were doing a worship night, and here comes Jayden. Here you come. And of course I knew you, and we're going to get into that in a minute. We're going to really dive into it, but I knew you, but of course, I didn't know that aspect of you hadn't led yet. And I remember Pastor Matt, he said, well, Jayden just wants to do a song here or there. And I think I okayed it. I don't remember, but I was like, yeah, let's just put her up there. Let's just see how she does.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. Everybody was blown away. I was in tears. Everybody was in tears. You not only did your worship bring in the presence of God, and your voice is very unique sounding, but at the same time, you had written the song, and the song was beautiful. And you know, from there, you continue to lead worship, and you've led with prominent ministries here as well, others in this area. And because the Lord is using you in that way. And I know that for many, like you said, going through heartache and stuff, that worship is an outlet. And music, we have an understanding that music is spiritual, and it can be used for the world, or it can be used for God. So if we're sad and we listen to sad worldly music, it feeds that intenseness. But if we are sad and we listen to worship music, it invites in the Holy Spirit, who changes our life. And so I know that God has great things for you, and that as you move off and go to college and do these amazing things, that you will be used in that way. You will continue to be used, and I'm sure over your future children, you'll be singing over them someday, because this is a part of what you've done. And you've redeemed your bloodline. You know, there's patterns and bloodlines, but we can take authority and say, not anymore, not with me. And so you stepped out of that place and said, these are patterns in my family, but now I'm going to break these things against all odds. And I know that you had a wonderful family, as we're in the adoption phase, right? So you were adopted in this rebellion, so in and out of suicidal thoughts, developing this relationship with God. But at the same time, you in that place, you were still told things that made it feel as if you weren't going to ever make it out of this. There was times that you had doubt. Can you talk a little bit? You don't have to talk about any particular person, but I know you were told things during this time that pushed against what you would try to get up, and it's like you're pushed back down.
I would say one of the biggest things was when I finally did tell my adoptive parents that I was suicidal. A couple years prior, I had told them about me cutting. And it was a different type of thing. At the time, I was just hurting a lot, and I was looking for an outlet. I eventually learned that exercise, sports, those were great outlets for when I was just like, okay, if I just trying to get rid of that mental pain, not necessarily get rid of it, but it's like, hey, I kind of need a break, And so I would use sports a lot. I was very competitive, but when I told them, or when they found out about that, they, I think, believed I was lying, because there weren't scars on me. And so when I did become suicidal, I hid it from them for a while, because I didn't want to be put in a position where it's like, oh, you're not telling the truth. And I think I was just worried I wouldn't get actual help anyways. And so I remember one night, it was really bad. I had been in a lot of trouble with the whole situation with boys, sneaking out with boys, which was once again on me. But I had become suicidal just out of the fact that I didn't feel like I was good enough. I had heard all these people saying how, oh, you'll change. Like, God can heal you. God can save you. This is my story. I was a drug addict. Now I'm not. All these things. And I was just like, well, I keep repeating the same cycle. I keep trying. And then I just keep going back to the same things. I didn't feel like I was going to change. I felt like I was just making everybody's world worse. My adoptive parents, I was like, I'm just making life harder for them. My siblings, I was told how, I had been told at one point that I went to go with my Mimi, and she would teach me to sew. And she did not appreciate some of the things that were happening at home. And so she accidentally left a voicemail for my adoptive mother. And it was not very nice. And she told me that, well, now there's no relationship. Now we're not going to see her. And, that's your fault because of what you've lied to her. You've told her these things. And how do you think it makes your siblings feel? Because don't you think they would like to go and learn to sew from her or other things? And I was just kind of like, well, that's not my fault. Like if they wanted to do that, they could. But
So this Mimi is your adopted grandma,
yes.
and she took your side and she had your back, and she
Mhm.
called your adopted mom and said some things needed to change, and that
Yeah.
caused a conflict, and then everybody was separated,
Mhm.
and now it's all your fault.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was situations like that. And then just my own thoughts that had put me in a mindset of, I shouldn't be here. This isn't right. I'm making everybody's life worse and just causing problems. And so I got into that mindset. And so it got really bad one night. And I didn't trust myself alone. And so my best friend at the time, her mom was a teacher at the school. And so I had her for a class and I went to talk to her and I was like, look, can I go home with you guys tonight? I don't trust myself at home. I don't trust what I'll do when I'm alone, but I just can't tell my parents. Like I don't know how they're gonna react. I don't know what it's gonna be.
And how old were you at this time?
I was 16. I
16,
believe.
okay.
Yeah. 16 or maybe no, I was 15. I was almost 16. And so um, she took me home, but she said, I need to tell one of them. I can't just take you. And so I was like, okay, don't tell my mom. Just tell my dad and, text him. And so she texted him and he was kind of confused. He's like, what's going on? And so he came to talk at the house and she talked to him first, kind of explained the situation and how I was feeling. And then he talked to me and I was crying and I said, what's going to happen? Like, am I in trouble? And I don't think he believed me yet. I think he thought it was just another cry for attention or something. And so you could tell he was very annoyed and just, that's what it seemed to me. And so the next day I went home. It was a half day at school, came home after school and I went to talk with him by our pool. And he was just like, what is going on with you? He said, what is this? What I don't understand. And I was trying to talk to him about it. He's like, well, if you felt so suicidal, why would you do this? Why, like, he just didn't understand it. And I don't think he believed me. And it was a hard situation for everybody. But I remember it was the first time ever that I yelled at him because he said, if you were suicidal, why wouldn't you tell us? And I yelled at him. I was like, because I didn't think you would believe me. That was my exact thought. And so I was at that moment that they decided, okay, well, we're taking you to psychiatric hospital. So I went to my first day and it was, I want to say, one of the first times in a while when my adoptive mom had shown a real care for me. Like I hadn't seen that love from her because I don't know if she was just hurting for me or if she was just scared. I'm not sure what was happening, but I remember she hugged me crying as she dropped me off. And she's like, it's going to be okay. And I think in that moment, she still had that hope that it was going to be okay. And I came back and I was doing better. And then a couple months later, it was just like I fell off the rail again. And that was where I hit the point of, okay, you say I'm going to be these statistics. At this point, why am I fighting this? So I started going with my siblings to parties, drinking, smoking weed. And I wouldn't say it was my favorite part of my life at all, but it felt like if this is where you keep saying I'm going, this is where I'm going to go. And that led to me going to another hospital stay because I was still suicidal. The medications they had been putting me on weren't working anymore. And it was supposed to be a long-term placement. And my adoptive mother said she was taking me there for behavioral changes. And she didn't tell them the depression, the suicide, anything. So I did. But because I wasn't suicidal while I was there, they said, okay, we can't keep you because your insurance won't cover you. And that was hard because I was like, well, I need the help. I'm not suicidal while I'm here, but I go home and I feel all that pressure again and I can't take it. I felt like I couldn't bear it.
And that's the thing, though. Sometimes people don't realize that people who are in depression or suicidal, sometimes it's not every day,
Mm-hmm.
and they have bouts of it, and
Yeah.
they are okay, and they're happy, and they seem like they're smiling, and unfortunately, I have known people who seemed very, very happy and took their lives because they suffer alone, because they don't
Mhm.
want to bother people, and for whatever reason. So if that's you today and you're watching, I just want to tell you that there is hope and
Mm.
there are people who care. If you are surrounded right now by people that don't understand, go reach out to the school if you're at a school, or if you are an adult and you work out, reach out to the coworker, reach out to somebody. There is somebody who cares. There's pastors all around. Reach out. That's the biggest thing. Is sometimes life can be really hard and people fail us, but that doesn't mean that you will not find hope and that you will not find care when you continue to reach out.
Yes.
And that's what you did. You essentially, you were reaching out. You were reaching out to your adoptive parents. They just didn't understand. You're reaching out to the counselors and
Mhm.
and the hospitals, but insurance got in the way. There's all these different
Yeah.
roadblocks, and here you are trying to fight the statistic. You're like, I don't want to be another statistic, and then you're to the point where you're like, well, I guess I might as well just give into it because I hear it so much. And the Bible says that our words have power, that death and life is in the power of the tongue, and that we'll
Yes.
eat the fruit of it. And we understand now that there is power in our words and speaking the word of God over our life. And I believe that's a tool that can help us. And I know that you overcame these things through that, but I want to stay on the correct timeline and continue. So you were adopted, going through these emotions, and then one day your adopted family said, "We don't want you anymore."
Basically, yeah.
And you're going back to your biological mom. So you were with your mom,
Mhm.
you were abused, then you go to foster care, 2 different homes, then you were adopted, and now you're being sent back
Yeah.
to your biological mom. At how old were you and what happened?
So it was actually shortly after that long-term stay. I was there for 3 weeks. It was probably a month after I got back from that my adoptive parents came to me and they were like, "We talked to your mom and said we asked her if she wants you and Kylie back, if she is ready." Kylie is my little sister and she is 14 now. And so they're just like, "Do you want her back? Are you ready?" And what was baffling to me at the time when they told me this was all these years they had been telling me how they believed my mom was probably just a terrible person. She must have been on drugs the whole time. And how, because I tried to have a relationship with her and I snuck around, but they found out and they were like, "That's not safe. I don't think she's healthy. I don't think she's okay." So it was kind of baffling to me because as long as I had fought them against that, I finally had reached a point where I was like, maybe they're right. Maybe she's not okay. Maybe she's not healthy. Maybe she is on drugs. I don't really know. And so I was kind of like, maybe I don't want a relationship with her. And once I had reached that point, they say, "Oh, well, we're gonna move you to her house." And that was a shocker. That was whoa. I remember crying and they were like, "Why are you crying? You obviously don't want to be here," and all this stuff. And I'm like, I was just like, yes, I've acted out. I am trying to make changes, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. I've been here for 6 years. I lived with them for 6 years and built a home with them. And I very much cared for my adoptive family. And so yeah, I was 16, and in October of 2023, I believe was what it was. Yeah, 2023, I moved in with my mom. We met in Dallas and put all our stuff in the car and just took off with her. We had been talking over the phone for a couple weeks, but I moved here and then life was certainly interesting. We were crammed into a pretty small house, but it did feel good. It felt right. I didn't know why it felt right, but it felt right to be back with my mom. I think it did heal a piece of me and my sister, to know her, to be with her, and to learn from her, and to learn who she was, and then who she is now. She was a youth leader at the church, and her husband were doing that together. And so that was, I think there was a certain sort of relief in that, even though I was broken from what felt like an abandonment from my previous family. That was healing. And she introduced me to, I would say, the spiritual relationship with God, because I had never been taught that side of it. It was always just, okay, Bible, prayer, church on Sundays. I know who God is. He knows who I am. I love him. He loves me. And so that was something very new to me, but that was literally what saved my life. Like you said, we met at a theater.
So how long was it from this timeline between when you were sent back to your mom and I met you in the theater? How long had you been here?
I think I want to say I had only been here for a month.
Yeah.
I mean, it was quick.
So I see this girl, which is you, in the
Yeah.
theater, broken and lonely, and prayed over you and prayed with some inner healing deliverance
Mhm.
prayers. And in the theater, you started to be set free by the power of God.
Yes.
And we developed this relationship, and I became a mentor. Um, and I don't know how much you want to go into this, but we're going to get into the second part of your story, into your healing and how that took place. And so, the medicines didn't work.
Yeah.
And I'm not against medicine. Medicines are needed in certain situations, but they didn't work with what you were experiencing was a spiritual battle.
Yes.
And with the spiritual battle, you needed spiritual warfare prayers. And that's what broke you free. And no, it wasn't easy. And it was a road to recovery. But I want to get into detail about the very moments where healing came. And so you can kind of go over those stories of what happened and how did that healing come in certain situations.
Yes. So I had the first deliverance from suicide at that theater. And I remember that was my first healing. I remember you prayed over my eyes and my ears, and especially my worship, and making sure I'm telling me not to let certain things into my ears, let certain things into my eyes, because those were portals. And I remember paying a little more attention to that, but I was still kind of not on the right pathway. I remember shortly after that theater, we went to the first Bound No More, I believe, that I had ever been to, and that was in Andrews. And I think it was really shortly after. And I remember seeing deliverance, and I remember at first I was kind of taken aback. It was new to me. So I had a lot of walls up when I received my first, I guess you could say, like, bigger deliverance, not because it was just, when you first see it, it's kind of shocking. But then I remember as I was doing that deliverance, and I don't remember what was being prayed over me or anything at that time and what they were trying to break, but I remember being told that they saw smoke coming out of my ears. And then I do remember the Jezebel spirit that they were praying over, and it wasn't from me, but they said that they had seen it from other family members. And so they were delivering me from that. But I remember what made me believe that this was real was I felt myself. It felt like I was watching myself. And I remember I started laughing. And I remember thinking in my head, this is not funny. I'm not sure what's going on. I don't understand what's happening. Why am I laughing at these people? And that was my connection of, okay, that is a spirit. That is
Yeah.
an evil spirit.
There was something within that wasn't natural at that time. And although it was, things of the past and situations and then also, like, when people say Jezebel spirit, that's just, it's a character in the Bible, and it's just talking about having those characteristics of, that nature. And those things started to, through prayer, just praying, and those things started to come out and off. And I think you received healing a few times. I can't remember, but I know that through this journey that you did come out of that place of being suicidal, thriving, laughing, telling jokes, being happy, singing worship music, and just like kind of taking off. It's like God really accelerated your life.
Yes.
Very quickly.
Yes.
And it's like there was still a lot of turmoil, and we'll get into that at home, and the transitions that took place, but God really, whenever you surrendered it all and you said, okay, just, I want healing and prayer. And it does look different whenever you're in a church where, it's church on Sunday and something different on Monday.
Yeah.
But whenever you are in a Holy Spirit filled meeting or church or revival meeting, it looks different. People are getting healed. People walk out of wheelchairs, there's deliverance prayers. And so can you kind of guide us through, like, what, I know that you had some physical healing and all of that, but how was it as you were going home, because all this stuff happened so quick.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to process in the midst of it. So there was some good things at moving back home, and there was some things that were negative, and you were having to transition all of that. But in the midst, you're getting this miraculous healing. Can you tell us some of your thoughts, or even any encouragement for somebody who's been suicidal and as a teen and gone through what you've gone through? Can you give any advice?
It is a hard situation, but going to God is the best thing that you can do, and going to people that understand the situation and are willing to pray for you. Those are the people that you want to look for. You don't want to look for people that are going to live through the worldly desires. You want people that are going to lead you in the right path. And deliverance was honestly what saved my life, because understanding that these spirits are evil and these spirits while they cannot make you do something, they can manipulate your thoughts and they can put you in that headspace. They can kind of manipulate your actions. And when I got delivered from the spirit of suicide, depression, anxiety. And when those things happened, that was what set me free. And that was what got me closer to God, because my spirit was no longer evil. My spirit was good, and my spirit was able to align with God and his will. And that,
So it's kind of like a rededication.
mhm,
You knew
yeah,
God as a child, but you didn't have that personal relationship. But now you finally have a relationship. So
yes,
you got saved and that rededication. And, but then in the home, there was transitions, there was hardships, there was things that were difficult. And one of those things, I remember walking you through every step of the way because I knew you could do it because you're very intelligent,
mhm,
was getting through high school.
yeah.
Talk about that real quick. How was it? So you have all of these things happen, trauma, 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 passed around, rejection by every corner. And then boom, God comes in, you get, through true salvation
Mhm.
and you get healed and delivered. And now you're having to navigate all of these things at one time and trying to finish high school.
Yes.
How was that?
That was interesting because when I moved in with my mom,
Yes.
I didn't go to school for 2 months because it was the end of the semester. It was kind of hard to transfer. I started one homeschool for the first semester. That did not go well. And I said, this is not going to work. So then I went to Richard Milburn Academy. I went there for about a year, and it's an accelerated pace academy. And you kind of do your work at your own pace. But a lot of kids that were not very safe, so to speak, were there, and I did not feel very safe, and eventually I could not do it any longer. So my last semester of high school, I started with University of Texas High School. It's an online program. It's guided, and it's honestly a great program. I would recommend it to a lot of people who want to homeschool high schoolers, but it was hard for me because it was my last semester. It was my senior year, and I am doing all these different things, but I'm also trying to finish high school, and I'm doing it myself.
And you were
There's
really behind.
Yes, I
And
got
you had to babysit often and you had to work.
yes. Yeah, I was working a part-time job at Domino's. Oftentimes I would be working till 2, 3 in the morning. Um, and that was definitely difficult. It was a different schedule. It wasn't your typical 8 to 3, or whatever most high schoolers would have. And I got very behind. And I remember talking to you a lot about it. And I wanted to go to prom with one of the ministry partners that's my age. He had a prom, and I was like, I would love to go because it's my senior year. I don't want to
Yeah.
miss senior prom. And so I went with him. But to get to that place, I had to meet some goals first. And I would say, I was probably 6 to 8 weeks behind on some of my schoolwork. And so
I remember.
yeah,
Yes.
I spent about 4 weeks trying to catch up, and I got probably caught up 6, 7 weeks in 4 weeks, which was miraculous. That required a lot of prayer and a lot of dedication and a lot of help from you and from my mom, and just support from people, and just being like, okay, you can do this. It's possible. And so I
And
did it.
you did the hard things.
Yes, I did
And
it.
you are a success story, and I want you
Mhm.
to know that. That's why I wanted you to be here today and with the beautiful GLC audience. And I
Mhm.
know that your story is going to transform others, but I want to just pour into you and tell you that I am proud of you because you've come so far and you've
Mhm.
been through so many things, and I know how hard it is. And I've watched you walk through it and helped with that journey, just a small part of that. And
Yeah.
and God has brought so many people along the way with this journey. It's like a puzzle. We all have our little piece, and I'm honored to be a part of that piece. And I know that your testimony is going to go far and wide.
Mm.
But just thinking about it, you had to grow up quick,
Yeah.
and you had to navigate life um, with really hard circumstances and very deep traumatic abuse. And then you had to grow up quick.
Yeah.
You were at times responsible for young children, and lots of young children at times, and you had to babysit often. You had to work. It's like you were like you were an adult and behind in all the schoolwork. But you did it with
Yeah.
God, and you did do those things. You did the hard things.
Yes.
What would you say to a high school student right now that's going to give up on high school?
I would say it's worth it. It is definitely worth it to get through high school because that gets you to your college, and you don't want to go back. You don't want to have to go back and do your GED. You're going to wish that you did it. You sat down in the classroom and you did these things, because ultimately, I remember what Cher taught me one time was my job for God, my ministry for God was my schoolwork at the moment. I had to finish that and I had to do it for God because everything I do is for God. And I think that's the most important thing that you can know or hear in this life.
Yes. And it's not too late. If you're thinking about it and you have a child that wants to give up on school, help them get into a program that will be able to work around their schedule and their needs. Or maybe you did, maybe you waited too late. But you know what? It's never too late to go back and
Mm.
finish those goals. And maybe you don't want to go to college, but maybe you want to go to trade school or start your own business. But be encouraged that God is with you. He's speaking today. And if you'll open the Bible and you'll read his word, you will feel his presence and he will guide you. He has great plans for your life, just like he did with Jayden. And you're still in the beginning of these plans. And I've just watched so much unfold. But not only did I watch you graduate from high school, I also watched you complete your first year of college. And I know you'll be moving. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But you completed a year of college.
Mm.
Let's talk about that and the journey through that. You know, it it felt almost impossible to get the high school diploma. You're like, I did it. Now I'm going to go to college. What was that like? 'Cause I know college is very hard the very first year, especially having to work all the time.
Yes, college was that was another level of difficult. I remember it was especially hard in the first semester because I had gone through some conflict with my mom and my family, and there was some distance there, and that was hard because I had just gotten my mom, and there was a very difficult situation for all of us. And so starting school with that, I I struggled a lot, I think, there in that aspect of things, just knowing, hey, things at home are rough. It kind of made it hard to focus. And then I was working part time to not really cover college expenses. I was covered thanks you to the uh, foster care system. That is one benefit of it is the college is paid for, but I still needed to cover bills. And I was working to get a car, which I got a car, and it is paid off now, which is, praise the Lord, one
You
of the
got a
greatest
car and
feelings
it's
ever.
paid off now. Did you
Yes.
hear that? See? Praise the Lord, because
Yes.
that's a testimony itself.
Mhm.
You had nothing. You had no hope.
Yes.
You were moved back home and the situation at home was rough. It
Yeah.
wasn't um it really wasn't much better, and you had to pick yourself up. And although you that hole in your heart was filled because you got to see your mom, and
Yeah.
she helped you with some things. It was a transition. There was things that you knew, like, hey, I've got to take care of myself
Yeah.
here. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and then you got a car, and then it
Yeah.
was paid off, and then you finished school. But let's talk about that. Because I know you're about to be going back to college again,
Mhm.
and there's so much to say. But
Yeah.
during that first year, and through the healing, through the transition, through all of this stuff, were there moments during that where God spoke to you to get you through? Because I know that continuing on what was hard because there wasn't a lot of time to study.
Mhm.
I mean, did you even sleep?
It depended. Towards the end of the semester, not very much. I was in college algebra my second semester, and that was rough because I was taking college algebra online because I thought that was such a smart decision. And so I would like to say that towards the end of the semester, I was living on energy drinks and just trying to get through it. But I knew it was hard. I went back and forth talking to people about I could just drop out. Of just the class. I was like, maybe I could just drop out of this class, try again another time or something. But I didn't want to lose the money. I didn't want to run into any issues. And ultimately, I had to understand that no matter what happened, God had me. Whether I aced this class, whether I failed the class, I had to understand that God had me, and what mattered was that I was putting in my effort and that I wasn't doing things halfway, because I've never been the type of person that likes to do anything halfway. I mean, I think that's how we should be as Christians. We shouldn't be giving anything half. We should be giving everything our full effort. And so I knew I had to do that. I knew I had to finish it out, and I'm so glad I did. I passed with a C, but I passed, and that is what matters. And I'm very proud of myself for what it took in the end. It was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of studying at the library. I remember the night before the exam, I was at the library till 10 o'clock. As soon as it closed is when I left. And I remember my fiance at the time was there with me, and he is going into engineering, and he is a math guru. And so he helped me finish that and would study with me. We had tables with expo markers, And we would just sit there with equation after equation. And I definitely think I owe a lot of thanks to him for passing that test because, yeah, he was a huge help.
But you did it in excellence, and that's your
Yes.
personality.
Yes.
And that's not who you were before. You were down, you were outcast, you were depressed and suicidal. And then you blossom into this beautiful flower, smiling and doing hard things. Not every day was perfect, but you still had internal joy. And then in the midst of all of this story here, you meet the love of your life.
Yes.
And you get married. And it is an encouragement because sometimes they'll tell the younger generation, don't get married too young. But there are times in that that does happen. And I didn't even know one of the mentors that I would look up to online for debate and things like that, because I like to study, was Charlie Kirk. And he would always say, get married young, and start your life. And so but you did that, but it was really a God thing in the situation. It wasn't like, oh, I just met some random person. I better get married and move out. It was like God was really in that. And so do you mind telling us kind of a quicker version of, how you met Zach? And I know you got married and his family embraced you and you were able to move in with them. And then now y'all are moving off to college, to Hardin-Simmons. But how did you meet Zach, and how did you know that he was the one?
It was all a very quick timeline. I met him at church, actually. It was a youth night, and it was my second week, I think, of youth there, and I wasn't loving it. I wanted to go back to the main service, and I told one of the youth leaders that had come and talked to me, I said, I don't think I'm going to come back. And she said, wait, just wait. I have someone I want you to meet, and I think y'all are going to get along great, because I didn't talk to anybody. I am very extroverted with people I know, but when it comes to situations like that, I keep to myself. So I was like, okay, I'll come back. And I came back that next week, and she introduced me to him. And I think the biggest miraculous thing was, at the time, even till then, every guy I looked at was an option. They were someone I was like, okay, is this my person? And with him, it didn't even cross my mind. It was, oh my gosh, I have someone I can talk about the Bible with, someone who loves Jesus, and they're in Midland, they're right here. Because I would like to say, no friends at the time, especially in the area. And we became best friends. I mean, it was within months. And then he asked me out, and I said no at first, only in the terms of I wanted to graduate. I felt I needed to close that chapter, and I had almost been single for a year. And that was a huge testimony for me, because I was always looking for another guy. It was always something. And so I needed that. I felt.
And I remember that when you were talking about that and how I don't want to date. I want to focus on God. And you did do that.
Yes.
So continue.
Yes.
Then you met Zach.
Yes.
After a year.
And then, so the night I graduated, he went with me and my family to Austin to do my graduation. Night I graduated, he asked me out. And so we had been dating for a little while, and we would go on just little weekend trips. He has family in Dallas, and we would go to Six Flags. We love roller coasters. That's about our favorite thing to do together. And we just kept growing, and we started talking about getting engaged very early on and getting married, but I wasn't quite sure yet. He said he knew. I led worship in the youth, and he said one night when I led worship, he talked to God, and he was like, he about said 2 words in, and God was like, yes, you're supposed to marry her. And I kind of laughed. I was just like, I don't
love
get
that.
That's
you laughed. He's like, I'm sure I'm going to marry you. You laughed.
Yes, I laughed. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see, because I was not sure yet. And I felt I was still really struggling with understanding what God was saying. And I remember a couple months later, he was struggling with something. And I remember telling him, like, I'm here for you, always here for you. And I'm always going to be here for you. And I was hugging him, and it was the weirdest feeling. It was like everything flashed before me, and I knew. It wasn't that I got this direct word from God. It was just, I knew in that moment, this is my forever person. Like, this is the person God had provided for me, because he's so gentle, so caring, so kind. And he never saw my trauma as a pity. He never used that as like, oh, I'm so sorry for you. He actually saw the strength that it gave me, and he admired that, and he pushed that. He's always pushed me for better. And so we got engaged within, I want to say, 6 months of dating, and then we got married within we had been 10 months of dating, and we got married. And a lot of people had a lot of opinions. I will definitely say a lot, especially those that live in the world. They were very like, they said, well, just enjoy yourself. Like, just wait a couple years, enjoy yourself. Don't tie yourself down yet. And that's what a lot of people do say these days. But I think it's the best thing to do because we're getting to grow together. Yes, we're not getting our individual growing, but we get to do that together. And that's a different type of special because if we're going to be together anyways, was our opinion, why would we wait? And we're now getting to experience life together, going to college together, moving out. And I think that has been such a beautiful thing for both of us and that we're so excited to start these new chapters together.
Yes. And I had the joy of watching it and a lot of first time for me, a lot of first for me in this past
Mhm.
season from different things in my life. I've been able to do some things that's new. And one of those things is, of course, I am an ordained minister. So I was able to marry you
Yeah.
guys. And it was such a blessing. And I wouldn't have done that if I didn't believe in you too.
Yeah.
Because I do think it's a serious thing, to get
Mhm.
married and it should be done properly. But I knew that God was a sinner. And
Mhm.
I love how Zach did lead you to Christ.
Mhm.
You knew Christ, you both knew Christ, you were saved, but he would take you to church and to do Bible
Yeah.
studies. He really cared about who you were as a person,
Mhm.
and he really was your best friend. And
Mhm.
so maybe there's some encouragement you can have for because you've been through both sides of this where you had trauma, abandonment, and rejection issues. Therefore, you were looking for different relationships with boys to fill that gap, right?
Mhm.
And then there was a point where you got miraculously saved, healed, and delivered, and you're like, I'm going to focus on God.
Mhm.
And so when you stopped looking, God, of course, brought this
Yeah.
for you. But can you speak just real quick to somebody watching about um, how they can come through that. Maybe there's a girl watching, or maybe and of course we have older people watching. Some people have had relationships and they've been broken.
Mhm.
What kind of hope can you give them?
I think the biggest thing I would like to say first is do not settle for less. That was something that I always did. I said, okay, well, maybe this person's just good enough. But I remember Cher teaching me and a couple others too that I could literally make a list and say, okay, God, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And God loves us and he's not going to give us something completely opposite direction of what we want, but he's also going to give us things that we didn't even realize that we wanted that was just the perfect alignment that only he could do. And when I learned not to settle was when I found the best person for me. I found someone who was Christ-centered and loved God and cared about God more than me. And I do want to say there is hope for that. It might not come immediately and it's never going to come on the timeline that you want it to, but it does come. You just have to trust God in that process, as hard as it is to do that.
I like what you said. You said he loved God more than me.
Mhm.
And that's truly what it takes. God has got to be number one in
Yeah.
our lives. And we have to love God first before we love our family
Mhm.
because everything flows out of the love of the Father. And if we love God first loved us, so we love him, then it's like a deep well
Yeah.
that flows in that alignment. And you figured that out at a young age. And I know you're getting older, but you're still a young lady.
Yeah.
But here's the thing is I know as you continue to go forward, we're going to see more from you. I mean, there's so many things I have no doubt the Lord's going to do, but what are your plans going forward? What are you going to go to school for? What are your plans? Lay them all out for us. Tell us where
Okay.
God's taking you.
Yeah. So we are going to Hardin Simmons in Abilene, and we're both going to the same school. I initially was not going to be going, but God has opened a lot of doors. And deep down, I knew I wanted to go to school with him, but I didn't think it could happen. And I never really prayed for it. But this has been just another testimony, in my opinion, that even though I didn't pray for it, God knew deep down in my heart what I wanted. And he's still giving that to me because he's good and he loves me. And so he said, okay, here you go. You get to go with him. And it's a beautiful school and with an amazing faculty and staff. And so I am going to be going for the plan is music education. I have to try out for the College of Music, but that would be my goal. So that way I would love to be a director with music, band, or even just a small little elementary school. I love music because that has been, even when I wasn't quite living for God, that was still something that was safe. And then it led me into my worship and stuff. And so that's something that I want to do for other people. I want to teach them how to use it in a proper way. and how to just follow their heart in that, because I know that I remember being told music was not really a career, that it wasn't something that was necessary, or like I wouldn't do much in it. And now I understand that even though it might be not be the highest paying career, or it might not be the most lovely looking job, it is the thing that has healed me, and starts like God has used that to heal me. And I know that God has used my music and my worship to heal others too. And I want to be able to lead people in that direction. And so that is what we will be doing. We will be working on campus. And that is what the next 3 years of our life, 3 to 4 years, are going to look like. And then from there, I'm not entirely sure. I know we want to get hooked up with a church in Abilene, and we're very excited to see what is held there, because I would like to get into ministry again. I love doing youth ministry, because I know that my testimony is very important for the youth, because I want youth to see that there is a way out. Because I think oftentimes the biggest issue is it doesn't feel like there's a way out. And it's like just waiting, anticipating that time, that moment when you turn 18. But even when you turn 18, some people, they don't go down the same path I went down. Some people, they end up down a path of drugs, and because they still don't have that right support. And I would like to be that support for others.
And I know at one point you do plan to be a mom.
Yes.
That's always been a goal.
Yes.
And you're going to be an excellent mom.
Yes.
And I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
And you're doing amazing things.
Yeah.
And if you are watching this today and you are in Abilene or that area and you would like to get connected with Jayden, she can lead worship, and she's been a youth leader, and she has biblical training and biblical counsel, and also inner healing and ministry of that way, where she is able to step in and really understand and make a difference in the lives of the youth. And so you can reach out to her by going to the website and going to the contact form. And so, I do believe that people, are going to be reaching out to you, because God's going to align you perfectly
Yeah.
where you need to be. And He's already done that.
Mhm.
But in closing thoughts, I would like to give you time to speak to the audience about any kind of encouragement, Bible verses that the Lord has carried you through. What can you say to the Gen Z generation coming up? Speak to Gen Z.
Yes. So my Bible verse growing up was, God is within her, she will not fall. And I think that is something to always keep in mind, because God is within you, and God will strengthen you, and He will get you through these hard times. You just have to lean on Him and trust Him.
That's right. And so as you continue to go out this journey and trust in the Lord and lean not on your own understanding, but acknowledge God, He is going to set your path straight. And for you watching today, He's going to set your path straight as well. There's so many things that we could be worried about in the world.
Mm.
There at every turn there's trauma, there's chaos, but also at every turn there's goodness and there's
Yes.
God.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is sometimes we lose focus on the goodness of the Lord. And it doesn't matter if we've been in foster care or adopted. It doesn't matter what and there's abuse. It doesn't matter what you've been through. You're not too far gone, And you watching today, you're not too far gone. That God can redeem your life. And just like Jayden, I was also in I was adopted and put into foster care. And before, I was adopted, I went through all those things too. And, God brought us together as a puzzle piece, and He's still forming the puzzle pieces. And I know that one of the things I want to encourage you to do is to continue to write music and to continue to do that, because it is truly amazing. And we just have about a minute left here, but can you just tell us as we close what was that verse about the pebble? And what was that meaning? Just real quick. Remember you said one more pebble.
I believe that verse was me saying that the devil, I was thinking about music and how I wanted to get into maybe country music, and the devil was giving me a pebble. Here's the fame and fortune you could have. That's what he gives a lot of people, using your talent. But God says, I have so much more than that pebble. And so that was where that verse came from, was that he just has better. He has better out there than anything else can give us.
That's right. The world will offer you many things. And whenever Jesus was in the wilderness, the devil tempted him, and he took him up and showed him all of the kingdoms of the world and said, this could be yours. But he knew that as the Son of God and as God, that he knew that there was so much more in the kingdom of God. And our God is powerful and he's eternal. And he has so much more than we could ask, think, or imagine. And he does care about the details. He cares about the little things. And just like I had told Jayden, sometimes we just make a list, right? So, and that sounds so silly, right? It sounds silly. Oh, make a list of the things that you want, but God cares about the little things. And if we align with the word of God and we align with his ways, when we start to say, well, here's what I would like, God will do that. And so I encourage you watching this today, as we close, to continue to believe again, stand up again, have faith again, believe for the more of God, open the word and get into relationship with him. Well, thank you for watching. This has been another great episode of Light of the Southwest. I'll see you next time.